Today, we're diving deep into a moment from history that feels, well, incredibly relevant right now. We're looking at a time when an entire empire's legal system was put on trial. This is the story of Prince Dara Shikoh, a chilling tale of how raw political power can absolutely crush the very idea of justice. And for this whole explainer, we're drawing directly from one incredible source. This is episode 69 from the meticulously researched book, True Courtroom Stories, by Mr. Zahir Ahmadmir. His work is just fantastic. It uncovers some of history's most critical legal battles, and the one we're looking at today, it's a stark, powerful reminder of what's really at stake when the courts face their ultimate test. And this quote right here is why this story from centuries ago is so important for us to understand today. The source actually frames this event as one of 3 moments when courts legitimize the destruction of democracy. So what we're talking about isn't just some dusty old tale about a 17th century prince. No, this is about a timeless and frankly dangerous pattern in the struggle between law and power. Okay, so to really get how a system of justice can be broken, you first have to understand how it was built. So let's start there, with the foundation. Because, believe it or not, the Mughal Empire had a surprisingly structured and sophisticated legal system. Yeah, this really shatters that old stereotype of some lawless ancient empire, right? The Mughals actually had a highly developed legal framework. I mean, we're talking about a system with structured courts, powerful judges called Qazis, and a whole legal code based on Hanafi fiqh, which is one of the major schools of Islamic law. It was a system that was really designed to be rational and predictable. Now, at the very heart of this story is a man who was, you could say, probably more suited for a library than for a throne room. Let's meet the idealist who's right at the center of the storm, the scholar prince. This is him, Prince Dara Shikoh. As the eldest son of Emperor Shah Jahan, yep, the same guy who built the Taj Mahal, Dara was the designated heir to one of the richest thrones in the entire world. You'd think his future was totally secure. But here's the thing. Dara Shikoh was not your typical heir. He was a true man of ideas. This guy was a profound scholar who personally translated ancient Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads, into Persian. He even wrote a book called The Mingling of Two Oceans, trying to find common ground between Islamic Sufism and Hindu philosophy. He was a voice for pluralism and dialogue in an age that was full of division. But as history so often teaches us, for every idealist, there's usually a ruthless pragmatist waiting in the wings. And in this case, that pragmatist was Dara's own brother. This is what sets up our core conflict: one throne and 2 very, very different brothers who want it. And this rivalry, it didn't stay a rivalry for long. It blew up into a full-scale war of succession. On one side, you've got Dara Shikoh, the philosopher, the scholar, the official heir. And on the other side, his younger brother Aurangzeb, a brilliant military commander and a political strategist with some seriously cutthroat ambition. It was the ultimate clash of ideas versus raw power. And make no mistake, this was way more than just a family feud. This rivalry plunged the entire empire into a devastating civil war. It was a crisis that didn't just shake the throne. It was about to push the entire Mughal judicial system to its absolute breaking point. Which brings us right to that breaking point. Aurangzeb, having won on the battlefield, now turns his attention to the courtroom. He decides to use the very system of justice his own family had built up to eliminate his brother once and for all. This was the empire's darkest trial. And this moment, it forces us all to ask a really fundamental question. When a nation's highest court, its highest judicial authority, is faced with a ruler who has absolute power, what happens? Does justice just bend to the will of the powerful, or does it completely break? But as our source makes so clear, the trial of Dara Shikoh wasn't just some one-off event. It's an echo that you can hear reverberating all the way through history, a timeless warning about just how fragile our legal institutions can be. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. Think about it. In 399 BCE, the courts in Athens used the law to execute the philosopher Socrates on trumped-up, politically motivated charges. Fast forward to 1659, and Aurangzeb does pretty much the same thing to Dara. And then, get this, just over 60 years ago, in 1958, Pakistan's Supreme Court issued the Dosso judgment. This was a ruling that legally validated a military coup, basically arguing that if you're successful, your illegal act becomes lawful. 3 different eras, 3 different cultures, one absolutely terrifying pattern. And that, right there, is the most crucial point of all. The story of Dara Shikoh isn't just a sad story from a long-gone empire. It's a perfect case study of a pattern we see over and over and over again. When judicial institutions, the very bodies that are designed to protect the law, are twisted and used to serve and legitimize raw, unchecked power. And so that leaves us with a huge question, a vital question for our own time. When you look at what happened to Socrates and Dara Shikoh, and you think about the long shadow cast by rulings like the Dosso judgment, you have to ask, how do we today build firewalls strong enough to protect our system of justice from the very political power it's supposed to be holding accountable? That's the enduring warning and the challenge that history leaves. An incredible moment in legal history, one that feels as relevant today as it did centuries ago. This is a special one for us. It's episode 69, and it comes straight from the pages of the amazing book, True Courtroom Stories. The whole thing was painstakingly researched by Mr. Zahira Ahmadmir, and it gives us this incredible window into the trial and execution of the Mughal prince, Dara Shikoh. So let's start with a big question, one that really sits at the heart of this entire story. Can justice actually survive when a king or any powerful ruler demands a specific outcome? Now, this isn't just some dusty old historical question, right? It's something that echoes through the ages, and we're going to explore it through one of the most intense and high-stakes courtroom dramas in all of Mughal history. All right, so let's set the scene. We're in the 17th century, and the Mughal Empire is in the middle of a massive power struggle. On one side, you have the brand-new Emperor Aurangzeb, a brilliant military commander and a truly ruthless political operator. And on the other side, his own brother, Dara Shikoh, who is more of a scholar, an intellectual, a philosopher. This was way more than just a family feud. This was a fight for the very soul of an empire. So here's the problem Aurangzeb was facing. He's just won a civil war, and he needs to consolidate power. That means getting rid of his main rival, his brother. But he couldn't just have him executed. That would look like plain, brutal tyranny. For his rule to feel truly legitimate, he needed the appearance of justice. He needed the law, specifically religious law, to sign off on his political goal. And this was the weapon he chose, the charge of Zindiq. Now, this wasn't just some casual insult. It was a formal, legal accusation of heresy, of abandoning the fundamental beliefs of Islam. And under the law at the time, being found guilty of being a Zindiq was a capital crime. This was the perfect legal tool Aurangzeb needed to eliminate his brother, all under the cover of religious piety. Okay, so the emperor has his plan. It seems pretty airtight, but there was one huge obstacle he apparently didn't see coming: a man with a conscience. And that man was Qazi Abdul Sattar, the chief judge of the entire empire. He was the one who had to review the case and deliver the verdict that Aurangzeb so desperately wanted. So the Qazi does his job. He actually sits down and reviews the evidence, which was mostly Dara Shikoh's own books and writings. But here's the thing, where Aurangzeb wanted to see heresy and apostasy, the judge, well, he saw something completely different. He saw a deep thinker exploring philosophy. He saw an intellectual mind asking hard questions. And he saw a scholar studying other religions to better understand his own. He saw scholarship, not a crime. And this leads to this just incredible moment of judicial courage. I mean, can you imagine the pressure? The new, all-powerful emperor wants a guilty verdict, and you're the guy who has to tell him no. But that's exactly what Qazi Abdul Sattar did. He delivered his official verdict, stating that based on the established legal principles, the Hanafi school of law, there was simply no case. The writings were not heresy, period. For one brief, shining moment, it looked like the system had actually worked. But what happens when a ruler simply refuses to take no for an answer? This is where the story takes a very, very dark turn. Because when Aurangzeb was denied his legal justification, he decided to just throw the law out the window. Aurangzeb's response was cold, calculated, and frankly chilling. Step 1, he completely dismisses the chief judge's lawful verdict, just ignores it. Step 2, he goes judge shopping. He puts together a whole new panel, not of independent judges, but of clerics he knew were loyal to him. And step 3, well, you can probably guess. This new handpicked panel did exactly what they were told to do. They issued a fatwa, a religious decree, declaring Dara Shikoh a heretic. Let's be crystal clear about what happened here. This new verdict had absolutely nothing to do with law or theology.
It was a political assassination, plain and simple, just laundered through a corrupted process to make it look legitimate. The outcome was a foregone conclusion before this new trial ever even started.
And with that fake legal hurdle now cleared, the path was wide open for the final, tragic act. The very system that was supposed to protect people had been twisted and turned into a weapon for their destruction.
The timeline is just brutal in its efficiency. That manufactured guilty verdict comes down sometime in August of 1659, and the end comes just days later. On August 30th, the scholar prince, Dara Shikoh, was executed on a charge that the highest judge in the land had already declared was baseless. This wasn't just the death of a man. It was a deep, deep wound to the justice system itself. Historians look back at this as a real turning point, a moment when the independence of the judiciary was shattered, leaving a permanent stain on its legacy.
So why are we talking about a case from the 1600s today? Because the story of Dara Shikoh isn't just a piece of history. It's a timeless and frankly terrifying case study in what happens when a legal system completely breaks down. It gives us 4 huge lessons. This case really lays out a timeless pattern of how justice can fail. It shows us what happens when judges are overpowered by a ruler. The law, which is supposed to be a shield for everyone, gets turned into a weapon. Due process gets thrown out in favor of what's politically convenient. And pretty soon, fear, not independence, is what guides the courts. And that leaves us with one final, sobering thought to chew on. The case of Dara Shikoh forces us all to ask, once you allow the law to become a weapon, who is actually left to protect you when it's eventually turned in your direction? It's a question that was as real in 1659 as it is right now. Courtroom stories. Now in this explainer, we're going on a journey, and I mean a real journey, across thousands of years of history. We're going to uncover a hidden pattern, a kind of thread of injustice that connects 3 of the most pivotal trials the world has ever seen.
So, what's the connection? It sounds like the start of a pretty weird riddle, right? You've got an ancient Greek philosopher, a powerful Mughal prince, and a modern Supreme Court. On the surface, they couldn't be more different. But trust me, by the end of this, you are going to see how they are all part of the exact same timeless story. So we're going to start our investigation by looking at 3 specific moments across history. And these aren't just moments where justice kind of stumbled. No, these were moments where it completely collapsed. And as we're about to see, each one of those collapses literally changed the course of a civilization.
Okay, our first stop is ancient Athens, the cradle of democracy. We're there for one of the most infamous trials in all of human history, the Trial of Socrates, a man whose only real crime, it seems, was thinking a little too much. Now just look at the official charges here. Corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. These were serious accusations in Athens. They were specifically designed to paint Socrates as this huge danger to the entire city. But was that what this was really about? No way. Of course not. The political reality was, well, a lot uglier. The truth is, Socrates was just politically inconvenient. His constant questioning made a lot of powerful people really, really uncomfortable. And that jury, it wasn't some beacon of justice, it was an instrument of public fear. The whole trial was nothing more than a tool to shut down a powerful voice of dissent. All right, let's jump forward now, a couple thousand years forward, to the absolutely dazzling and frankly deadly world of the Mughal Empire. And here we find our second case, the trial of Prince Dara Shikoh, the guy who was next in line for the throne. And what was his crime? The official charge was heresy. Now that's a grave accusation in any era, but it was especially powerful in the supercharged religious atmosphere of the 17th century Mughal court. It was a charge that pretty much came with an automatic death sentence. But, just like with Socrates, the charge was a total smokescreen. What's so interesting here is how it's almost a carbon copy of the first case. You have a court that was being pressured by political authority. In this case, it was Dara's own ambitious brother, Aurangzeb. There was no real evidence at all. The law was just twisted, manipulated into a weapon to get rid of a political rival in a brutal fight for the throne. And now for the final piece of our puzzle, which brings us right into the modern era. We're looking at a nation's highest court and a decision that would send ripples through generations to come. Pakistan's Dosso judgment, all the way in 1958. So here's the setup. General Ayub Khan has just overthrown the constitutional government in a military coup. The whole country is holding its breath, looking at the Supreme Court. What are they going to do? Will they uphold the Constitution and say the coup is illegal, or will they fold?
And this is how they answered. The court, led by Justice Munir, pulled out this really controversial legal theory to basically justify the coup. Their argument, pretty much, was that might makes right. You know, that a successful revolution just becomes the new law of the land, simply because it won.
The consequences were, well, they were catastrophic, and they were immediate. This one decision completely dismantled Pakistan's democracy. It gave a green light to future military takeovers, and it just shattered the independence of the judiciary for decades. This is a perfect illustration of the immense power a court really holds.
Okay, so we've got Athens, Mughal India, and modern Pakistan. 3 totally different times, 3 different cultures. So now let's start connecting the dots and reveal the universal pattern that links every single one of them.
So, 3 great civilizations. 3 moments where the judicial system was put to the absolute ultimate test and failed. And in that failure, they reveal one single inescapable truth about the relationship between law, power, and justice. Okay, let's really dig into this table, because it just lays everything out with this chilling clarity. In Athens, the law was manipulated to silence a thinker. In the Mughal Empire, to kill a rival. In Pakistan, to support a dictatorship. See the pattern? The method was always the same, the manipulation of law. And the result was always the same, a complete judicial collapse that led to disaster for their society. And this brings us to the central point of this whole entire investigation. When the one institution that's designed to be the moral compass of a nation, the courts, loses its courage, the entire nation is just set adrift. So, what's the antidote? If judicial collapse is the disease, then what's the cure? Well, it comes down to one simple but incredibly difficult thing: a judge's courage. That is the ultimate responsibility of any court. You know, there's a legal concept called ratio decidendi, which means the reason for the decision. But the true reasoning, the actual foundation of any court's legitimacy, is this. Its power doesn't come from the state. It comes from its moral courage to stand up to the state when it has to. Its legitimacy comes from its refusal to just surrender. Because just look at what happens when they do surrender. The stakes could not possibly be higher. This isn't just about one bad case or one wrong decision. It's a domino effect that leads directly to repression, to authoritarianism, and ultimately, as history clearly shows us, to civilizational decay. And that leaves us with this incredibly powerful, stark moral lesson. A court's failure is never a passive thing. A judge's silence in the face of tyranny is an act of complicity that can literally poison a nation. But their courage, their willingness to speak truth to power, that can be its salvation. The trials of Socrates, Dara Shikoh, and the Dosso case, they're not just stories from the past. They are warnings for us, right now, because history is always asking the same question of its courts in every single generation. And that question is, will you have the courage to answer? This entire analysis is the amazing work of Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir. He's a constitutional and corporate lawyer and the prolific author of more than 55 books on a huge range of critical subjects. We are just deeply indebted to his incredible research for this explainer. Thank you so much for joining us.